How Americans are wasting their money in 7 ways. Insane. Hello friends, this is Finance Boss. I bet you already read the title. Today's video is going to be interesting again because today we're going to talk about how Americans specifically tend to waste money in very strange and kind of insane ways. As Americans, we tend to use credit more than most other nations, and while some of that comes from systemic issues that can push us to use credit card debt, such as our lack of universal healthcare, a lot of it does come from spending choices that we don't need to make. Our goal in pointing out these habits is not to shame anyone, especially because some of these things tend to be a little bit out of our control, but rather to point out to us how much they are not normal on a global scale and not something that we have to opt into in many cases. We can all be smarter about the way we spend, be more conscientious about noticing waste, and live a more financially and environmentally balanced life. So, let's get right into it with 7 insane ways Americans waste money. Number 1 is eating way too much meat. Red meat isn't just bad for our health, although it's very much that. A recent National Institutes of Health AARP study of more than 500,000 older Americans concluded that people who eat the most red meat and processed meat over a 10-year period were likely to die sooner than those who eat smaller amounts. Meat, especially meat of the higher quality, we should be opting for whenever possible, tends to be the most expensive items in our grocery basket, and the cost of eating meat on a daily or multi-daily basis is even less justifiable when you consider that there are many less expensive sources of protein that we could all be opting for at least once a day. But yet, despite the financial and medical cost of eating so much meat, Americans simply love it. Number 2 is fast fashion obsession. So like it or not, Americans simply love fast fashion. And it's not that Americans have always been this way, as we tend to be with other consumer habits. According to one article, the stakes are high to make fast fashion work. A rapidly changing assortment of trendy clothes help drive customers into stores and potentially stave off the encroachment of Amazon.com. And this phenomenon is not just driving how we dress, it's also driving how we store things and how much stuff we need to store, which is creating its own sub-phenomenon. Number 3 is things we don't or can't use. So when it comes to spending habits, Americans often have eyes that are bigger than our stomachs. And I don't just mean about all of the meat that we're eating, although that is also a thing. We often sign up for things that seem on the surface like a good deal, but when broken down into cost per use, often tend not to be. And there are many spending areas, from the cheap to the life-changing expensive, where we're making these spending decisions. One example is gym memberships, which tend to run Americans about $696 a year on average, which wouldn't be such a shocking number if gyms did not report that they typically expect about 18% of their clients to use their membership consistently. Chances are that a lot more than you would normally spend for dog toys and treats, and over the long term, it could add significantly to the cost of owning a dog. But when it comes to these things we buy and don't really get our money's worth on, perhaps no example is bigger or more American than college. Number 4 is huge houses. This is also one that's really destructive, both financially and even for mental health. Studies have shown that the increasing space between homes, space between neighborhoods, and even space between you and the other people in your home leads to increased social isolation and anxiety among Americans in suburban areas. We are essentially paying much more to get farther and farther away from each other. And while a lot of this has increased over time in America, the same can't be said for many other countries. The dream of owning a single-family home that could comfortably fit a baseball team is still pretty American. Number 5 is keeping things ice cold. Now, I will fully admit that I'm very guilty about loving ice cubes. I love to fill a glass entirely to the brim with ice cubes before putting my drink in it. But on a national scale, whether we're talking about ourselves physically or the things that we're eating, Americans love shit to be really cold. One huge phenomenon is our constant demand for out-of-season fruits and vegetables. We've become accustomed to expecting all produce at all times of the year, which demands an enormous supply chain of national and even international refrigerated delivery. We should feel as a nation a lot weirder than we do about biting into a fresh, juicy peach in the middle of February in Boston. And it's not just out-of-season foods. We also refrigerate basic daily staples like milk and eggs, which other countries don't refrigerate because our pasteurization processes are different. Here's the best part, although we ostensibly have these huge-ass refrigerators to keep perishable foods good for longer, we actually don't stop less frequently than countries with smaller refrigerators. Number 6 is not cooking. On average, Americans eat a commercially prepared meal about 18.2 times a month or more than once every other day. In dollar terms, that translates to an average of $232 spent eating outside the home every single month. As the years pass, fewer and fewer Americans are being taught really good, sustainable cooking practices in the home. For the average person, food and dining are the second biggest budget category every month after living costs, like rent or mortgage. Learning to cook and starting with more basic essential ingredients that almost always cost less than prepared or packaged foods is a huge game changer for how we spend overall. Setting a goal to reduce the number of times we eat out or order per month by half can be the difference of thousands of dollars a year for the average American. And number 7 is always needing new things. About 60% of young people 18 to 35 globally have a smartphone, and in America, that number rises to about 90%. And these increasing numbers are based on an increasingly unsustainable throwaway culture. Almost 80% of phone sales correspond to people replacing their phones even though their phones are still in good working order, according to Greenpeace. It's not just phones. When it comes to cars, motorists who buy a brand new car typically keep it for about 6 years, which is up from about 4 years in 2006. And yes, that is definitely an improvement, but it's still hugely wasteful when you consider that most new cars are designed to run well over 10 years or 200,000 miles. But it's not just phones or cars. Americans tend to throw everything away now, and because of this, the entire appliance repair industry has been vanishing. Culturally, we have become about what is bigger, shinier, newer, better, quicker, and cooler. But all is not lost. So many of these instincts are easy to fight at the individual level when we remember that they're just not normal when it comes to the global scale. And some of these things can be difficult to avoid in practice, or they may already be decisions that you've made in a big way. But we can all challenge ourselves to be more conscious and thoughtful about our individual spending cues. Even if you're American or not, but can relate to these things, you might have to start challenging yourself now. Think more like an adult and start saving. It's not just for your tomorrow, but for your whole future. As always, guys, thank you for watching and don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And this is Finance Boss. Until next time.